I move you, sir, that House Bill 222 be taken from its place in the orders of the day, read for a third time by title and sponsor only, and placed upon its passage.
Motion's made and seconded that House Bill 222 be taken from its place in the orders of the day, read for the third time by title and sponsor only, and placed upon its passage. Clerk, please report.
House Bill 222, an act relating to legal actions concerning the exercise of a person's constitutional rights. Representative Kulkarni.
Gentleman from McCracken.
Mr. Speaker, I yield to the lady from Jefferson 40 for explanation of the bill and motion thereon.
Chair recognizes the lady from Jefferson 40 for explanation of bill and a motion thereon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, at its core, House Bill 222 safeguards First Amendment rights in our courts. Specifically, the legislation creates a procedure, a special motion to dismiss, by which a judge may dismiss certain civil lawsuits that are used strategically to intimidate, censor, or silence those who speak out on a matter of public interest or concern by burdening them with the cost of a legal defense against what is ultimately a meritless lawsuit. These are known as SLAPP suits, or strategic lawsuits against public participation. This phrase was coined in the early 70s, and since then, over the years, many states have enacted their own anti-SLAPP statutes. These state statutes, some of them have been problematic because they differed greatly in terms of scope and applicability, which is why the Uniform Law Commission chose to develop a uniform law over the course of several years with input from numerous stakeholders. The Uniform Public Expression Protection Act was adopted in 2020, and this legislation is based on that uniform language. Now, this bill has been modified and strengthened quite a bit since I first introduced a version back in 2019, with input and feedback from numerous stakeholders. To borrow a phrase that I heard recently, it has just enough Kentucky sauce to address every concern that was brought to my attention and ensure that it is not at odds with any aspect of our civil procedure and still stay within the realm of uniformity for ULC purposes. This bill has broad bipartisan support. It is endorsed by organizations across the ideological spectrum, including the ACLU, Americans for Prosperity, the Bluegrass Institute, the Kentucky Open Government Coalition, the Kentucky Press Association, the Pegasus Institute, the Public Participation Project, and the Uniform Law Commission. For those who are not on Judiciary Committee, I presented this legislation along with the gentleman from Jefferson 33 last August, and last week it passed unanimously out of committee. Mr. Speaker, I ask the clerk to report House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 222.
Clerk, please report.
House Committee Substitute 1 to House Bill 222.
Lady from Jefferson.
Colleagues, House Committee Substitute 1 simply removed a phrase that had been left in from a previous draft. This bill has gone through several iterations and a lot of back and forth, and this is just correcting an error in Section 2 where that language is ultimately captured in subsection B of that same section. So it doesn't change anything substantive about the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions, but if there are none, I move to adopt House Committee Substitute 1.
Motion is for the adoption of House Committee Substitute 1. Any discussion on the committee sub? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. House Committee Substitute 1 is adopted. Lady from Jefferson 40.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And ladies and gentlemen, there were some questions raised in the committee meeting, and since then, the gentleman from Jefferson 33 and I met or spoke with those colleagues and amended this legislation to reflect some of their concerns about the clarity and conciseness in parts of the Uniform Act language. These were duly noted, agreed upon, and incorporated into House Floor Amendment 1, which I now ask the clerk to please report.
Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 1 to House Bill 222.
Lady from Jefferson 40.
Thank you. I have a series of changes that are not, again, substantive, but simply clarify and reference parts of Kentucky civil procedure. I'm happy to go through them, and if there are any questions about them, if there are none, I would move for adoption of House Floor Amendment 1.
Motion is for the adoption of House Floor Amendment 1. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, those in favor signify by voting aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. House Floor Amendment 1 is adopted. Lady from Jefferson 40.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield to the gentleman from Jefferson 33, who is a co-sponsor on this legislation and been very instrumental in moving it forward.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Jefferson 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I want to thank the lady from Jefferson 40 for bringing this bill and for working on it for many years so diligently. Want to also thank the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the gentleman from Boone, and the gentleman from Todd from helping us tighten this bill and make it much improved. I'll just be very quick, and I'll say two things. Number one is what this does. People say, well, what is anti-SLIP? What does it do? The lady from Jefferson 40 said it better than I can, but in my words, what it does is it protects the rights of individuals, regular folks, the people we represent, to speak out on issues of public concern. If they speak out on an issue of public concern, a lot of the times they're speaking to someone who's a liberal who has power, or who's a conservative who has power, or just a person who has power. And sometimes that person misuses the court system to kind of shut them down and shut them up. And that person who's a regular person can't afford the process, can't afford big attorney's fees like the lady from Jefferson 40 might charge them, or something of that nature. So they quiet themselves. And that's not in the interest of our citizens. So we want to make sure that you can't abuse the process. You still have a right, if someone does say something that's untoward or defamatory, to file that lawsuit and to get the claims that you need to forward the claims you need to forward. But if it's done frivolously, and the standard to prove that's very high, as it should be, if that's done frivolously, then we're not going to allow that claim to proceed. We're going to allow that speech to stand. That's number one. Number two is, one of the objections that we've heard is that this is a rule of evidence, and we've met with a lady from Shelby and talked about that a lot. So everybody, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Process questions go to the court. Substantive law is ours to do. We are the legislature. The rules of evidence is kind of a mixture. So when our Court of Justice was created in the late 70s, Chief Justice Palmore worked with the then Speaker of the House and President of the Senate, and they came up with a way to work together to forward evidentiary questions. And so we work together. Here, though, the evidentiary issues that are in this bill are the substance, because the substance of the bill is you can't abuse a process, the court system, to harm my interest to speak the truth about an issue of public concern. So the evidentiary issue is the substantive claim here. That's why we believe that we have the right to make this, and it's fully appropriate to make this law, which again is a uniform law throughout that's being pushed in a number of other states throughout the country. With that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lady from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'll just close by saying that this is a complicated bill. It is fairly wonky, and it's about civil procedure. But I will say that it is an incredibly significant piece of legislation when it comes to protecting freedom of speech and ensuring that every Kentuckian has a fair and expeditious judicial process. If there are no further questions, Mr. Speaker, I move passage of House Bill 222 as amended by House Committee Substitute 1 and House Floor Amendment 1.
Question before the body is passage of House Bill 222 is amended by House Committee Substitute 1 and House Floor Amendment 1. Is there any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, clerk will sound the chimes. Those in favor vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Roll call is open for your vote. All members voted? Does any member wish to change or explain their vote? Clerk will take the roll. Being 82 members voting aye, no members voting nay, House Bill 222 is amended by House Committee Substitute 1. House Floor Amendment 1 is passed. Lady from Jefferson 40.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the vote by which House Bill 222 was adopted be reconsidered, and that motion to reconsider be laid upon the table.
Without objection,